Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're going to completely reframe our understanding of a ridiculously misunderstood emotion. We're talking about anger. So, you can go ahead and forget what a certain little green Jedi master told you about the path to the dark side. We're actually going to journey from these grand pop culture myths and ancient archetypes all the way down to the hidden, subconscious tension that you might literally be carrying in your jaw right at this very moment. If you want to understand exactly how your mind maps reality and how your body keeps the score, you are absolutely in the right place.
Okay, let's dive into this. You're probably familiar with that famous cinematic axiom, right? Fear leads to anger. Anger leads to hate. Hate leads to suffering. Well, we're structurally upgrading that famous cascade by throwing in a crucial step right at the beginning, at T0, which is confusion. You see, psychology usually treats fear as the baseline survival mechanism, but that kind of misses what happens before fear can even take form. The mind is actually desperately trying to run away from confusion.
To understand why, we have to look at how our brains actually operate. Basically, the human brain is a prediction machine. It's built to map reality to keep us safe. So, confusion? That is the ultimate void. Think about it. It's a state of zero orientation where the map just doesn't match the territory anymore, and your brain simply cannot compute a predictive model of what's going on. And this isn't just a mild inconvenience. It results in this terrifying systemic paralysis. Because, well, you can't exactly fight or flee an enemy that you can't define.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how fear isn't a weakness at all. It's actually a biological rescue mission. Seriously, fear is a massive computational upgrade over the total void of confusion. The absolute second that confusion crystallizes into fear, boom, your brain has successfully synthesized a narrative. It's telling you that we aren't blindly lost anymore, there's a specific threat right over there. In a kind of grim way, fear is a massive relief because it replaces paralyzing chaos with a highly tangible target. It gives your mind a vector.
And that vector points straight to anger. Anger is, at its core, an action-oriented emotion. It's designed to bridge the gap when our reality gets disrupted. Usually this shows up as epistemic anger, which is totally driven by uncertainty. That's when you feel powerless in a really chaotic situation. But there's this fascinating exception, and that is deontic or moral anger. This one isn't driven by uncertainty at all. It's anchored in absolute, unshakable certainty. It is the crystal clarity of knowing exactly what someone did and demanding a forceful response to it.
So the crucial point is, when does transparency actually fuel the fire instead of putting it out? Let's look at these exceptions. First, you've got injustice and moral violations. These happen when a boundary is intentionally crossed. Then there's deliberate obstruction, which is when someone knows the right path but just flat out defies it. And finally, habitual anger. That's when your nervous system automatically fires up a defensive shell before your rational mind can even process the facts. In all these certainty-driven cases, the anger is essentially acting as a really forceful social enforcer.
If we zoom out to a macro level, it is absolutely fascinating to look at how we as a society judge this kind of righteous anger. A punitive mindset, which is actually driven by a deep underlying uncertainty about the stability of our social rules, just wants to punish rule breakers to restore this fragile sense of order. But a truly harmonious systemic mindset, it views injustice totally differently. It diagnoses bad behavior as a structural failure or a bad incentive. It's basically a glitch in the system rather than some malicious sin. So righteous anger definitely evolved as a vital tool for turbulent tribal environments, but in a perfectly optimized society, it would honestly just be an alarm bell pointing to a design flaw.
And this brings us to a really profound shift in how we can personally wield this emotion. Enter instrumental anger. This is the concept of deploying your anger as a calculated tool, or what ancient contemplative traditions like to call skillful means. It's all about experiencing the emotion and utilizing it for its effect, but without losing your own internal equilibrium. It really is the ultimate expression of emotional agency. Let's compare how this actually looks in practice. In the reactive state, you are basically unconscious. A trigger happens, your nervous system floods, and anger completely takes the wheel. It dictates your volume, your thoughts, everything. You are entirely controlled by the state. But in the instrumental state, you are fully conscious. You calmly evaluate the threat and choose to channel a calibrated level of intensity. In this state, you are the one driving the car, and anger, it's just the high-octane fuel that you intentionally chose to pour into the tank to blast through a specific obstacle.
And this brilliantly illustrates how we can completely reframe historical archetypes. Take the story of Jesus and the money changers in the temple. If we look at this narrative through a psychological framework, this wasn't some unhinged, ego-driven loss of temper, not at all. Instead, it was a dramatized, highly controlled performance of righteous disruption. It was a theatrical, incredibly sharp intervention designed to shock a stagnant, exploitative system into awareness. And the key here?
Once it served its purpose, that wave of intensity receded entirely. But let's step away from the grand archetypes and theoretical models for a second and talk about you, right now. Why is your jaw secretly clenched? Go ahead, unclench it. I know you just did. We've spent time talking about deploying grand instrumental anger, but there is a very real, physical reality to the emotional friction that you might be subconsciously holding on to at this exact moment.
To understand why this happens, we have to talk about Carl Jung's concept of the shadow. See, we all have a conscious ego. That's the social mask, the persona we wear to appear super cooperative, polite, and totally unbothered. This ego banishes any internal friction to keep our self-image intact. But here's the thing. Those rejected thoughts, those little frustrations and impulses, they don't just magically vanish. No, they get shoved down into the Jungian shadow. It's essentially the hidden basement of your psyche. And because your conscious mind is keeping that basement door shut so tight, all that trapped energy has to express itself physically as subconscious tension.
Let's move to and see how this builds into a biological loop. Evolutionarily speaking, muscles like the masseter in your jaw tighten up to prepare your skull for impact, or to signal defense. When you experience unprocessed friction, but your nice, polite persona forces you to keep it together, that energy just settles right into these high-tonus muscle groups. And here's the truly wild part: the facial feedback hypothesis. By holding that physical tension, your face is actually sending a continuous threat signal right back to your amygdala. It literally keeps this low-grade anger humming in the background without you ever forming a single conscious angry thought. Crazy, right?
The contrast here is just incredibly striking. On one side, you have instrumental anger. It's loud, it's purposeful, conscious, and externalized. You're wielding it like a tactical tool. On the flip side, you have subconscious facial tension. This is low voltage, automatic, hidden, and it is constantly carrying the weight of unexpressed friction. Basically, one is the active, deliberate act of wielding anger, while the other is subconsciously carrying it around as this exhausting, heavy, physical burden.
So, the million-dollar question: how do we drop this burden? Well, we can actually bridge the conscious mind and the body using a 4-phase somatic mindfulness protocol. This is essentially doing real-time shadow work. Phase 1. You locate and actually exaggerate the tension slightly. I know it sounds counterintuitive, but it brings it under conscious control. Then, Phase 2. Name the unacceptable narrative. You have to give the frustration permission to exist. Moving to Phase 3, you execute the physiological sigh. And finally, Phase 4. Integrate the energy and find the insight.
Phase 3 is the mechanical key to unlocking this entire process. The physiological sigh is a very specific breathing pattern, and honestly, you should try this right now. You take a deep nasal inhale until your lungs feel absolutely full, followed immediately by a second, sharp sip of air to maximize that lung expansion. Then you release a long, slow, audible exhale out through your mouth while consciously dropping your lower jaw. This specific pattern is pure magic. It quickly offloads carbon dioxide and instantly signals your autonomic nervous system that the threat is gone, literally forcing those facial muscles to release their isometric hold.
Once that physical tension finally melts away, you're left with the raw energy of the emotion, totally cleanly separated from that physical bracing. And that leads us to our final thought. The next time you feel that spark, ask yourself, what is your anger trying to protect? Was it defending a boundary? Was it reacting to an inefficiency? Because when you stop viewing your integrated emotional energy as a flaw that needs to be suppressed, and instead start seeing it as a vital diagnostic tool, that is when you fully reclaim your agency. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep learning, keep questioning, and I will see you in the next one.